Hello, hello, and welcome to another podcast episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotions, emotion regulation. Today, I have special guest Linda Clement. She is going to be joining us to talk about how we can help our kiddos manage big emotions and keep their resilience going. And she's really focusing on how we as adults can change to listening, supporting, and encouraging and nurturing children rather than telling them what to do all the time. And so it's really changing, going from conflict and stress to in chaos and all of those types of things to peaceful and cooperative environments. I hope you enjoy. Well, Linda, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
It is absolutely my pleasure.
Why don't we start off by having you introduce yourself to everyone listening?
I can do that. I am Linda Clement. My role in life these days is to help parents untangle the conflicts and lack of cooperation that it seems to be just rampant everywhere and find the underneath of what is actually causing it and what actually solves it, as opposed to the sort of I'll just keep giving you tips and tricks to try and work around your kid's nature. And then when it doesn't work when they're 24, I'll sell you something else. Um, I really like to deal with the fundamentals, and that's actually what I'd like to talk to you about today is a program or a video that I made that is specifically for addressing the hyper reactivity, the tendency to be in our survival brains that's so common in our modern world because we are under so much stress so much of our lives, and how to get out of that and find out that we are actually all really similar. We have deep compassion for each other. We have great perspective. We are very good at discernment. We're really good at understanding ourselves and other people when we're not in our survival brains.
Right. Yeah, that's about, and I talk a lot about that. I do a lot of presentations, and it doesn't matter if I'm talking, well, behaviors, anxiety, and externalizing behaviors. I mean, a lot of it just kind of comes from that foundation that you were talking about. Well, let's jump in. What maybe where would you think would be best to start looking at that survival brain?
Well, we can talk a little bit about the structure involved in it, or we can talk about just how common it is for even really, really little kids to be in full coping mode all the time, and how we think of that as personality when in fact it's just coping strategies. Things like
Right.
forgetfulness or clumsiness or um, pathological defiance disorder and other things like that. That sort of that reactivity to the world is really based in stress. And one of the fun things that I found out about is that it doesn't make any difference if the reason why you're coping with what's effectively traumatic stress is because you spent half of your childhood having somebody tell you that the clock was more important than your body for sleep, for eating, for cuddling, for time with your people, whatever. Or if it's because of a major car accident or being displaced because of a war. The coping strategies that human beings come up with are the same.
Mm.
So they seem to be built in, and they are what our survival brain does to keep us feeling safer. And that's really diametrically opposed to being happy. And when we get stuck in that, and when kids get stuck in that, they become reactive. They get habits and addictions that are a problem. They reach for solutions that don't work very well because it's natural to try and feel safer. But when we're talking about people who would like to be happy and feel at peace, none of those work. None of those coping strategies work.
Hmm. Well, they are very different, right? That safety for survival versus being at ease.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a difference between what we do to make our brains feel safer, often which are dangerous things to our bodies, and what we do in our thrive brains to be safe. They're
Mm-hmm.
they're quite different things. And for a lot of people, I don't even know how many conversations with parents while I'm coaching that I say, will you find that safe place inside? And they look at me like I'm talking about, well, just go speak Mandarin because people can speak Mandarin and you're a people. It's just
Right.
this foreign idea to them where people realize that they have never felt safe either. And they don't know how to find that and they don't know where to find it. The tool that I found late last year as a result of a scholarship program from a coach um, is just an awesome tool, probably the best one I've ever found for instead of trying to feel safer, just get out of that part of your brain and use the part of your brain that feels safer and finds ways of being safe and makes more sensible decisions and connects with other people and all the things that we would really love to have in our lives.
Right. You've pointed on so many different things that I want to comment on, so many different pieces there. I mean, the foreign language piece and even just some of the, the coping strategies that we think are adaptive in the moment, but truly are not. But now that you've mentioned this tool just to get out of the brain, let's talk about that.
The author is I always mess up his name because I think he's from Central Europe somewhere. Shirzad Shamin is his name, and it's from a book and a series of coaching programs called Positive Intelligence. And it's about getting into our forebrain where we have executive control and into our right brain where we have big perspective and where we can take in a lot of data and make big decisions with great ease. That's one of the things that our right brain just does quite naturally. And we're much more creative in that space, and we're much more connected to other people when we're in those two pieces of our brain. Our left brain and our hind brain are much more data and survival. So one of the things parents get tangled up in is trying to convince their children that they don't feel this way or that they don't need that thing or that, they're trying to convince themselves. You even hear women say it sometimes, I have the children, the house, the husband, the white picket fence, all the things. Why am I not happy? It's because data doesn't make us happy. This side of our brain is about survival. This side of our brain is about enjoyment and joy. And the cool thing about this tool, it's really simple and fast to use, and it just calms that part of our brain down, which naturally brings back the part of our brain that's smarter, and we automatically feel rested and calm and energized and far more capable. And it's almost magic. I have been teaching a couple of other body hacks that are kind of like that. There's one, it's a vagus nerve hack where you blow on your thumb really hard, like you're blowing up a balloon, and it lowers your heart rate. And it doesn't matter why your heart is racing. Your heart can be racing because you drank too much last night and you woke up in the middle of the night with your heart racing. It could be perimenopause. It could be because you just about got wiped out by somebody who carved in front of your car too quickly, or somebody who drove too close to you as a pedestrian. There can be any reason. But if you just blow hard on your thumb, on your left thumb, for a couple of breaths, your heart rate will go down. It's like magic.
Why in that? Look, I know the exhalation helps calm the nervous system down, but how come the left thumb? I've never heard that before.
It's connected to your vagus nerve. The same way your left
Okay.
ring finger is. That's why
Okay.
ring fingers were connected to your heart. So
Okay.
your left hand is more directly connected to your heart. I don't know why it works, but it's magic. I love it. The other one
Okay.
is the dive reflex. If you can get your body to respond to being in water, your heart rate will drop and it can't go up. It's one of the reasons why swimmers are the healthiest in the world, because their heart rates stay really low all the time they're exercising. And
Interesting.
and you can replicate that by having a long drink of cold water or by putting a cold face cloth on your face, a cold wet
Right.
face cloth on your face. That'll do the same thing. It triggers the dive reflex and your heart rate drops.
Right.
So what the PQ reps do, which positive intelligence like IQ or emotional intelligence, EQ, that he just went PQ, what they do is bring you back into your body right now. And what you can't be doing if you're in your body right now is worrying about the future or fretting about the past. And that's how we get back into our Thrive brains. And there's all kinds of different ways that he suggests. My favorite one that he has is you just put your fingers together really, really gently so you can feel your fingerprints on both hands. And then just as you're getting super cool about how that feels, start moving one hand down the other one and just feeling all the sensations. It's such an unusual thing to do. I get goosebumps when I do it, that it really just brings you right back into your body, because you can't pay attention to that and something else at the same time.
Right.
You can do it any way, with any sense that you have. If you're in the middle of an interaction that's not going very well, looking at other people's eyelashes or the flecks of color in their eyes or the shape of their glasses, anything that brings you back into your physical senses in the moment will quiet down your survival brain and bring your Thrive brain back online. And you'll often find yourself in the middle of an argument when you almost want to laugh, but you think I'll probably get punched, so I shouldn't do that. But you suddenly feel much lighter. And the cool thing about that is that we're contagious. Our moods are contagious. So when we're crabby and angry and impatient, other people around us reflect that back to us and amplify it. But when we get out of that and step into calm, peaceful, coordinated thinking, creativity, other people around us mirror that as well.
Right. Yeah. Well, this is everything that I talk about when I talk about emotion regulation and resilience. It's being able to drop back into the body. Because when we try to suppress emotions and push them away, they just grow stronger and stronger. So it's actually a
Mhm.
turning towards. So I do things a little bit different, but it always comes back to dropping into the body to keep our prefrontal cortex online, not to try to calm, not to try to change our state, to change our thinking or any of that. It's being in the present moment because then we can take in all of the information because when we're anxious, we're cut off. We only see what the emotion wants us to see, the threat that's there. And so by being present, we can see the bigger picture to see we're not being attacked. We're not,
That's
there
your
is no,
right brain.
yeah,
That's not
exactly.
just your forebrain coming online, that's your right brain coming online as
Coming
well.
online.
And that tunnel vision that happens in very stressful moments, and it's a survival strategy because if somebody's coming at you with a knife, you really should pay attention to that and not be like, oh, look, a squirrel, for obvious reasons. But most of what we're reacting to is not at all dangerous, regardless of how it feels in our body. And it is quieting down that part of our body by being back in the now. One of the other ones I really like is finding all your toes. Like, can you feel your middle toe? Like, can you feel it touching the other toes? Can you feel it touching your shoe or touching the air or what temperature it is? All that kind of like just focusing on part of your body that you don't normally think about. And you
Right.
can say, "Hey, feet, I missed you."
Yeah. And
But
that makes
that's
sense.
partly this. It's partly the big perspective of your right brain that's coming back online too.
I was just reading research recently. This is emerging research, but it makes sense. Is that when you're in flow state, so flow when you're not aware of time, you're just enjoying whatever the activity is that you're doing, it actually turns off that fight flight part of our brain.
Yep.
So, it's quite interesting, which makes sense, everything that we do in our work. So from there, what would the next step be? Or is there more to that once we,
I think from a parenting perspective, because I'm often coaching parents, they always want a tool that they're going to teach their children to use. And my point is, you need to get really good at this because you need to get really good at this. We've got much more experience using coping strategies like distracting ourselves from our feelings, like not even noticing that we're becoming anxious. We shift so quickly into something that we deal with that we do to dampen the anxiety. We need to get so much better at being in the now. Little children are automatically in the now. We need to get better at it so that we can lead our children in that way, so that we can lead other people, partly with our brain state, because as I said, they are a bit contagious, but mostly with our lack of reactivity. When it doesn't matter if your temper tantrum in front of you is a toddler or a teenager or an adult, when we don't react to it in the pattern of the dance that we grew up learning that they've been reacting to their whole lives, you can start to see that their tantrum or whatever they're having is as much a reflection of our brain state as it was of whatever was really going on. And when we change how we react, they change how they act.
yeah,
And it really is a big dance. The more people we can get more of the time into their thrive brain, the happier the world will be. Which is why I give that training video is free. It has no sales pitch on it. It has no follow-up series of emails or anything. It is not an opportunity to sell things to people. It's just a really important tool that I think people just need to have. So it's free.
and I'll make sure that that's in the show notes for everyone. And that's such an important point. I'm always saying that we are the best role models, but we do need to, and it's interesting because I'm just thinking, I've never thought of this, structured practice sessions for adults, because with kids, we practice, right? We just don't tell them. Okay, now we're going to practice. And for me, I will actually put them into situations. I'm pushing their buttons. I'm trying to get them frustrated or upset on purpose, right? And so I think that we need to, as adults, also do that
Yeah.
too. So setting up times, whether it's going into something that you know is going to be challenging, but I think it's just making that, giving yourself lots of opportunities to practice the skill so that when kids, because we're human. And so if you're like, okay, I'm going to do this thing, and then our kids start freaking out at us, we forget. So we
Yeah.
just need to build that muscle.
Yeah. Well, and he Shiraz, wine. Shirzad talks about that specifically, about how important it is to increase the number of times that we do this in a day, because we're building neural connections. One of the neural connections that we have that is super speedy is going from zero to freaked out completely through our survival brain. Something our brain effectively smells in our environment that reminds us of a terrifying experience in our childhood, possibly where an adult was freaking out completely, which is even scarier for a child, will automatically react that way without the ability to think about it, because that pathway is strong. That's
Mhm.
a super highway. That's got all the train traffic on it. It's all going in one direction. We need to retrain our reaction time by practicing going back into our Thrive Brain regularly all the time.
Yeah,
And like you say, when you know you're going into something, it's a really good time to do a couple of PQ reps, like, 10 seconds of getting back in your body 100 times a day is worth more than all the weekend seminars you could possibly take on the subject,
right.
because it is that rebuilding neural connections. You want to increase the time that you spend in your Thrive Brain, partly because it's relaxing and joyful and wonderful, and it's a lovely place to be. But also because the stronger you make that, the quieter your survival brain and all its fabulous attributes become, including your self-criticism, including your reactivity and your draw towards dopamine hits, and like all those things that are highly addictive. Have Our Thrive brain's not interested.
Right. Yeah.
Have you read the Rat Park research?
I haven't, no.
Fascinating story. I absolutely love it. I don't know if we have time for the long version. Short version is Vietnam vets coming back from the theater in Vietnam. The Doug people were losing their minds because they knew that heroin use in the war was just outrageous, like 80% of the soldiers or something. And they were ramping up for this massive problem with addicts coming back from the war. They were all ready for it. And the interesting thing is, when they came back from the war and reintegrated with their family life and their real life, they didn't have any use for heroin anymore, because first of all, they weren't in the middle of a horrific war, and they weren't around it all the time. It wasn't in their culture, it wasn't in their society. So with very few exceptions, almost everybody who was using daily or weekly in the war went 14 hours on a plane and didn't ever use it again. And they couldn't figure out why.
Right.
So some guy who was doing rat research on addicts realized that all the research they were doing on rats had rats in little cages, which is not a normal. Rats are social animals. This is not a normal place for rats to be. This would be like doing, social experiments on prisoners in solitary confinement. This is not where you find out about normal rat behavior. So he designed Rat Park, essentially a great big cage that had activities and socializing and places to hide and stuff to do and things to explore and treats and rewards and all kinds of stuff. And then they found that you can get a rat addicted to pretty much any drug you have almost immediately in a cage. But in Rat Park, they couldn't induce the rats to drink the heroin laced water with any amount of sugar.
Wow.
They wouldn't take it. So the whole idea that it's the substance that's the problem, not the society, not the culture, not the social network, it just got blown. And that alone says, when you're in your Thrive Brain and you're feeling safe, all of your addictions will just go away. All of your problematic behavior, all of your struggling to exercise between Christmas and New Year's, like anything that the goals that you're trying to reach, all of the difficulty involved in them just falls away when you're in your Thrive Brain, because it is the place of flow. That is where we live in our best lives. We're the most sensible in that part of our life. We're the most capable. We're the most creative.
And so connection is a key piece. I did know about the war vets, and I had, I assumed it was just based on associations because our brains, based on associations and the stimuli and all of those types of things. But that really comes back to those connections. And a lot of teachers listen to this podcast as well. And in schools, I'm always asking, do you have a safe place? And they almost always say yes. And I'm like, well, the whole school, first of all, should be a safe place, not just this little corner. But second of all, we don't run, when we look at other mammals, ground dwelling and mammals will run to a safe place when they're scared. But mammals like apes will run to a person. And so those connections are so important. And
Yeah.
we don't we talk about it, but I still don't think that we give it enough credit for, really when we're looking at the world, so many kids are behind screens. I think this is going to open up a whole other topic, but they're more disconnected now than ever before, even though we think they're more connected, through the internet, but they're so disconnected. And I think that that's a huge problem. So, on the one hand, yes, we can be doing these things, dropping in the body, turning on the thrive brain, but I think it stems first from that relationship.
The interesting thing about that, and there's sort of five different directions I could go into this. We could talk about the school system for decades. The interesting thing about that is when you're in your thrive brain, you automatically connect with people.
Mhm. Mhm.
And and you're right, for herd animals or group animals, social animals like us, we do run to other people in a natural environment. But when you're talking about children being disconnected, the first thing they're disconnected from is people. Because if they're, you know, with their parents and their extended family and their neighborhood throughout their childhood, they have opportunities on a continuous basis to connect. But if they're in daycare and preschool and violin classes and scouts and soccer and blah, 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 and school, and all of those activities, with very rare exceptions, think adults are interchangeable. So they go to daycare for the first year in one room and then they go to a different room, which doesn't mean a different room, it means a different person. And then that person moves on or gets promoted or leaves the country or gets wins a lottery or whatever, and they disappear. And then this person disappears, and then they have a different teacher, and then they have another coach, and they have somebody else. Kids are dealing with an enormous amount of loss, and they're doing it under the surface alone. So it's not just that there isn't a safe corner in the school, it's that there's no safe people in the school. Because frequently, by the time kids get to school at 5 or 6, they have had dozens, if not hundreds, of losses of key critical people in their lives. And they have no way of handling that when they're 2 or 18 months old or 6 weeks old. They don't know how to handle it. And because nobody around them is ever talking about their emotional experience, because they're not connecting, because there's 4 babies and one adult, or there's 8 toddlers and one adult, or there's 27 children and one adult, nobody has time to connect.
Mhm.
And this is a brand new modern situation that we don't have a way of dealing with as human beings. And our children have absolutely no way of dealing with it. And this has changed since I was a kid. When I was a kid, I knew one child ever who was in daycare. And now it's unusual to find a kid who isn't in daycare.
Yeah, that's so true. Have you ever read Hunt, Gather, Parent?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So good, so good.
Yeah.
And I mean that's a piece, right? It's not a whole village that needs to raise a child, but at least 5 or 6 adults for one child.
And
And
they should be the same ones for a really long time,
I
not
don't
this
see
one
ones,
because you're
yeah.
one and that one because you're two.
Yeah.
Like
I'm
that
doing
structure alone is a problem.
I'm doing a consultation right now with the school, and they've got a kiddo with really disruptive behaviors, but he's in
Mhm.
foster care, first of all. And second of all, his classroom teacher at the beginning of the year went on sick leave. There was some health. And so it's been substitutes, right? Maybe for a week, but it's been
Well,
inconsistent.
and from a kid's point of view, even without talking about the loss part, from a kid's point of view, in a culture that says strangers are dangerous,
Hmm. Yeah.
like what's a 5-year-old supposed to do with a totally new unknown to them adult
Yeah.
weekly or daily.
Oh, we're opening up so many cans of worms. There's so many. These are all I often talk about traps that we fall into, right? And you've already listed even at the beginning, at the opening, things like put on your coat, but I'm not cold, right? You need to eat, you
You
need to
have to eat,
sleep, you
it's
need to
dinner time. Yeah, you have to sleep, it's bedtime. Yeah.
and all the stranger danger. And there's so many traps that we could fall into. We probably need 2 or 3 part series just to go into all of these things. So well, I guess, if we're to take the key takeaway from today, it really is, being able to drop into the body so that we can turn that thrive brain on. Is there anything that parents can think about just or teachers who might be listening or therapists, actually, I have therapists listening as well. Um, Things to think about to help kids learn this skill. Whether it's to help them practice or things to make sure we say or do just to make sure they're really, really engaging.
I think I think part of it is it would be great if in general in the school system, instead of worrying about whether or not they know what a bee is called and they can recognize it in 4 different fonts and handwriting, it would be more helpful if they could recognize what an emotion feels like.
Mhm.
So overall, just bringing more emotion language into the world, because that foster kid who's acting out probably doesn't have any idea at all what the word for what he's feeling is. And if he had the word, he might be able to say, oh, hey, total stranger I've never met and don't feel safe with. I'm not feeling safe in this situation. And I find it really frustrating that you're bossing me around and I have no way of saying no.
Yeah.
If we opened up the conversation about emotions and how they feel in our body and made that a 5-minute piece of every school kid's day, in a generation we would have a completely different situation going on.
Absolutely.
Because I live in the real world. I know that daycare is an economic reality for the vast majority of parents. That doesn't mean we can't talk about how it's affecting our children with our children. And we need to talk about our anger, our frustration, our sadness, our grief, our loss, our difficulties in order to show our children how to express these emotions in healthier, more mature ways. Because so many kids today, especially foster care and all of that, they're living in what is effectively an emotion-free zone. And there's been some really interesting research into emotion-free zones as it applies to healthcare workers and how much COVID burnt them out because of that expectation. You're not allowed to be afraid. You're not allowed to be grieving. You're not allowed to be angry or frustrated or anything. You're just motion free. You're neck up. You don't have any body. And look at the autoimmune disorders that we have.
Yeah.
Look at the incredible addiction problem that we have. This is all from divorcing our bodies from our brains. And we need to get back into our bodies on a regular conversational, you seem to be feeling frustrated or annoyed, or you're looking a little bit bored, or you're reacting like you're feeling trapped. Like all that kind of conversation needs to be going on far more frequently around children. So they can say with their own mirror neurons, that's what it looks like on my mom's face when she's mad. Yeah, that feels like mad. They can connect it from more than just a you're feeling angry because kind of recipient of therapy. It's more of an ongoing open conversation about the fact that we all have emotions. And
Yeah.
the super important takeaway is the resistance to that vulnerability is our survival brain.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think that's an important point. Even teachers, I'm saying, I want you, I don't want your stress to seep out and become contagious to kids, but I want you to share your frustration, your sadness. There was a vice principal once who felt so like a lot of shame because he cried in front of his students one day because his wife was in a car accident, right? And so he didn't know, he just found out she was on her way to the hospital, didn't know how, and he cried. And I said, "Of course you did." He's like, "But I was so vulnerable in front of the kids." I'm like, "That was fantastic." They
That's a
need
sense of strength.
Yeah, and it was funny because he actually works with a lot of quote unquote behavioral kids, and he said it was magical. The boys all came together and they were nurturing, and there was no
Mhm.
behaviors. But I said we need to show these emotions. We can't let them seep out, like act like everything's okay, because kids are going to pick up on it. Our nervous systems talk to each other.
Yeah.
But by being able to show your emotion and talk about it, saying, I'm
Yeah.
upset, I'm frustrated, whatever, and this is what I'm going to do, that's showing that emotion regulation, drop into our own body, right? To do that. So, so good
Yeah.
all around.
My sister had a choir teacher, and she told me this story, but I know the teacher, and I that was her all over the house. Her She came to the choir one day to explain why it was she was going to be gone for 6 weeks because my dad died and I have to go to Cincinnati.
Oh,
They're like, "Are you our Stepford wife? Like, what is this? How divorced from your emotions do you have to be to even be able to do that with your body on your face?" Like, it
yeah,
was just she said it was so disorienting and all of it was just disconnecting. Like she used to really like being in choir with this lady because she was really good at bringing out powerful emotions in the music. And then all of a sudden she was just this robot who was 150 miles away.
right. And then it
And
makes
she
kids,
probably thought she had to.
yeah. And then kids who are seeing adults putting on a smile all the time are probably thinking, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just be happy? Right.
Mhm.
And that's just
Yeah.
perpetuated with social media. So,
Yeah. Well, and The Simpsons touched it with Marge telling Lisa just to swallow it.
yes.
That
Yeah.
was a great episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I think there's so many little tidbits. I mean, just to continue on, but even just to take away for today. So I really appreciate all of your wisdom to share with everyone and breaking it down into really simple, ways that people can pick up. I will be putting your information in the show notes, but for the listeners, what is the very best way for them to find you if they wanted to reach out?
I'm probably easiest to find on Facebook. My profile's wide open. You can feel free to friend me and I will respond to any private messages. I'm Facebook / Linda.Clement.733. That's me on Facebook. And if they're interested in just getting that 30-minute training on how to do PQ reps, how to recognize your survival body, and how to get out of it, that one's under HTTPS subscribe page.io/mental fitness recorded.
Okay, great. And I will put that in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It was altogether my pleasure, and I could talk about this for days.
Me too. Yeah.
Fascinating.